I ran across a story of how cathedrals were built. It took hundreds of years to build these things. Generations of men and women poured their entire life into building these massive, historic, mind-boggling feats of architectural and engineering wonders. And then they die and they never see it finished. And I was like, how big a vision do you have to have for the end product to give your entire life to it and yet never see it completed and be like, that was worth it?
When I was about 10, 11, we moved to this close to 200-acre piece of property up on the Locksaw and the Selway River in Idaho. And I'd get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and get on my Honda, and I'd go 3 or 4 miles up the Selway River there, catch 3 or 4 fish, and then get back home and go to work. It was a dream life for a kid. I just enjoyed being around Dad. I began to think, I want to live my whole life here. My PE coach was asking if I would consider running in a regional race. And I said, well, I'm not really sure that my dad will let me. And he said, well, let me call your dad. I said, no, I'll talk with Dad. And Dad said, well, when is it? I said, well, it's in May 7. It's on a Saturday. And he said, well, that's a real busy time for us because we're getting ready for summer and people are coming. I said, well, I think I could go down there and be back in half a day. And Dad said, well, okay. When it was time for my heat, the coach had put me in the middle with, I had about 3 guys on both sides of me. And so I got down on the blocks. You get your hiney up in the air, get the knuckles down. We come out of the blocks blasting. All of us are giving it everything we got. I was out about 6 or 7 steps. The muscle locked all of my legs so the knee would not bend to let me forward. The pressure pushing down then on my leg, it just went bang!
One of the biggest gifts my dad gave me growing up was that I knew my dad loved me. With all of the stuff that you don't know in life, there was one thing I didn't have to wonder about, and that was whether or not my dad loved me. Dad was preaching a youth retreat, and he was preaching on the cross, the power of the cross, and surrendering your life to the cross. And he was telling his story about how God had called him into ministry, and it was about surrendering his will to God's will. And in so doing, we think we're giving up so much. In reality, he's actually giving us more than we would have had we not surrendered. I remember thinking very distinctly, Father, what do you want me to do? I want to give you my life. I want to serve you with my life. Looking back, and I believe it was the Lord saying, you're not going to go into one specific field and influence that field for my kingdom. I'm going to put you in a position where you'll have the ability to influence every field for the kingdom of God.
So we got to the hospital. They took me into the emergency room. These 2 bones were laying side by side. One femur bone is clear up into my hip. The other femur bone is down just about to my knee. The process was for my leg to sit in this trough and then to start pulling the lower leg down where they would hold it there and the healing would start. About the 4th week, I knew God's Spirit was talking to me. And he was saying, I want you to go into the ministry full time. I would talk back to the Spirit and say, that is not a good idea. I'm up here on the Locksaw with my dad, and that's where I want to stay. That's where I want to live. I want to find a woman, get married, raise my kids, and that's where I want to live my life. This kind of conversation was going on for 2 or 3 days. There was a couple of nights I'm not sleeping. On the 3rd night, it was 2 o'clock in the morning. All of a sudden, the lights in the hallway got really bright. And I just sensed the presence of God was coming, filling that hallway and the room where I was. the Spirit of God brought a calmness into my soul that I can reach back even over 50 years ago and still touch that presence of God and that calmness, that peace that came in my soul. I said, okay, I'll go. I'll follow you.
God was asking my dad to leave his dream. At least that's how my dad interpreted it. Looking back now, what I realized is God was not asking my dad to give up his dream. God wasn't satisfied with the size of my dad's dream. God isn't a dream slayer. God's a good father. He's a dream giver. And I think he was asking my dad, Greg, if you give me your dream, I'll give it back bigger and better than you could wildly imagine.
I had a dream one night. It was a very clear picture of a wheel. It looked like a bicycle wheel. And the rim of the wheel went around the Pacific Northwest. And in the center of that wheel, the hub was Wenatchee. People were coming down those spokes to learn more about God. So I told Candy, and one day we were driving out of Wenatchee, and I pointed up there onto the hill, and I said that the Lord showed me a place, the facility is somewhere up there on that hill. And that was in the 90s. And we didn't talk to anybody about it because we didn't have any clue what that dream meant.
We planted Grace City Church, and we're growing, and it's becoming obvious we're going to need a home. So we're looking for property. And so I walked this piece of property, and I'm like, oh, this might work. And so I called Dad. I go, Dad, you want to come out and take a look at this property? And he comes out to the property, and he looks around, and he's getting that look on his face, that look that, says God's about ready to speak.
I felt the Spirit of God come back on me. And I said, I think this is the place, Josh. I think this is the place God showed me in a dream.
I was looking at an aerial photo of our property. It just hit me just like a flash of thunder. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I got on my computer and I Googled Bloxall Log Cabin. I just stared at the aerial photo of the 200 acres at the confluence of the Clearwater and the Locks on the Selway that Dad had left, and the picture of our property that God had given us to purchase and to build Grace City Church on. The similarities between the two just became so striking. A dream had been born in the heart of a boy at the confluence of two rivers to build a business with his dad. That boy thought he was leaving his dream, when in reality, God was calling that boy to a different state where at the confluence of two other rivers, he would not build a business with his dad, but he would build a church with his sons.
It's one thing to believe that there's God. It's one thing to say that I love him, but I want to challenge you, would you trust him? Trust him. What that means is you're going to let go. You're going to let go of your own self and say, well, I got to do it this way, or I got to hang on to this, or I got to hang on to that. Just let go and trust God. And I'm here to tell you, after over 52 years of walking with God, I have absolutely no regrets. I can tell you, he has been faithful. You just trust him, and you will not believe what he has for you.
Every time I see a baptism, every time I hear of a marriage that's been restored, every time I hear the story of God using the people and the work of Grace City Church to change someone's life, I think about a kid in Idaho who wasn't sure if he should leave the family business or not. Could God be trusted? What God can do with one kid from the sticks who says, okay, I'm in. That's the story of Grace City Church. I ran across a story of how cathedrals were built. How big a vision do you have to have for the end product to give your entire life to it and yet never see it completed and be like, that was worth it? One day when it's done, people will walk in, and in that moment of wonder and awe, the bricklayer, the mason, they knew they'd be a part of that moment. God's building this cathedral of glory, his kingdom cathedral. Men and women have been faithfully responding to the call of God for generations. He could have built it without me, but that he would invite me and include me in the privilege of laying my brick. That's the kingdom of God, that God chooses not to build it apart from us, but that he chooses to build it through us.